Anna, we're going to talk about primary school places in London now, as tens of thousands of families found out today what school their children would be going to in September. Almost 10,000 children have failed to get a place at their first choice primary school. Why is that number so high?
Well, yes, some parents will inevitably be disappointed today across London. There historically has been intense pressure on primary school places in London and a bit of a mad scramble to get into the top schools. We are seeing a little less of it now because the number of children in London is dropping and the number of children applying for primary school places is dropping. So this year, we've seen almost 10,000 children not get their first preference school. But that is a slight improvement of 0.6% on last year. And overall, 98% of children will get a place at one of their 6 preference schools.
As you mentioned there, applications have actually dropped this year. What are some of the reasons behind that?
Yes, we've seen applications for primary school places drop by 2.2% this year compared to last year. There's a number of reasons behind it, but overall, the number of children in London is dropping. Partly that's due to a falling birth rate, which is sort of dramatically affecting numbers in London. But also, there are families leaving London due to the cost of living crisis. Brexit has also been blamed, and the pandemic, where people decided to move out during that time. So overall, London is facing a bit of an exodus of families from the city. It's impacting on schools, as the Evening Standard has reported. Many are actually being faced with a decision on whether to close because they don't have enough pupils to keep going and to keep the funding going. So what it means today for parents is a slight rise of 0.6% in the number of children who are getting their first preference school. But there are still 10,000 who haven't got their top school. And that's because despite the drop in numbers, there are still really amazing schools that are massively oversubscribed and people still really want to get into. And that hasn't changed.
There are particular areas in London where you are more likely to have secured your first choice than others. Just walk us through some of those statistics.
Yes. When you look at the borough breakdowns, there's quite stark differences in the percentage of children who have been allocated their top choice school and those who haven't. So in Kensington and Chelsea, only 75% of children will start in September at the school that was their top preference. Kensington and Chelsea often has one of the lowest rates in the country. Other parts of London where children have a lower chance of getting into their top school is Hammersmith and Fulham, Wandsworth and Westminster, where all around the 80% mark. But in Hillingdon, for example, 95% of children will go to their top school, as well as Barking and Dagenham, Bexley, Hackney, Richmond upon Thames, Newham, Sutton, Tower Hamlets and Waltham Forest, all around 90% will get into their top choice school. The Pan London Admissions Board, which allocates the places, often points out that London is unique in that students travel across borough boundaries to get into the school that they want often, and the transport links are so good, there is a lot of movement. So even though people who live in one borough, they may not be applying to a school in their borough if they're on the edge of a borough. So that does slightly change the figures somehow.
How do schools decide which pupils get priority?
Mostly it's based on geography and how close you live to the school. Many schools also have a sibling policy. So if you've got an older brother or sister already there, then you get priority if the school is oversubscribed. And some schools also have religious criteria. So if you meet those, you could also get preference. But families are allowed to list 6 schools in order of preference. So if they don't get it into their top one, then they could well get into their second one.
How does London compare to other parts of the country when it comes to competition for school places?
London schools are generally harder to get into the top ones because there are just many more people. London schools are best in the country based on exam results. They do brilliantly, and that's been a big turnaround in the last 20 years. So there's high demand for London schools, despite the drop in the birth rate and the number of families leaving London that we've talked about. London schools are still great, and many people really want to get into them. And you still see massive scramble for the best ones, and people moving to be in the catchment area or to be, the closest they can be to really good schools.
Is there any advice for parents listening now who might be concerned because their child hasn't got a place at the school they wanted?
Yes. If your child didn't get into their first preference school, they will be added to the waiting list of the schools that were listed as higher preferences. There is a lot of movement. Sometimes people move out of London, as we've seen, before September starts. Sometimes people will go private or accept the school that they were offered, even if it wasn't their first preference, and then decide not to take up their first preference one if they're offered it. So there is movement. Parents are being told to stay on the waiting list for their schools, for the schools that they may prefer, and not to give up hope, and to ask for help from boroughs if they really need it.
You can find out more about these stories and others in the Evening Standard newspaper or on our website, standard.co.uk. And that's it from this episode. This podcast is back tomorrow at 4 p.m.